The Democrats are obstructionists. It's horrible what they're doing. They're not approving people. They're taking them out to the maximum 30 hours. That's a lot of time, 30 hours, to interview people that are going to be approved. In one way, it's showing how bad, how obstructionist these Democrats are. It's a disgrace what's happening.
President Trump unleashing on Democrats for smearing his nominee to head the VA, Dr. Ronny Jackson. This after Jackson withdraws his nomination to become the new secretary of the second largest department in the federal government. Here now to discuss, Adriana Cohen, a syndicated columnist in the Boston Herald, also radio show host, and Michael Barnes, former George W. Bush policy advisor, currently managing partner at DCBA Law and Policy. Adriana, let me start with you.
Well, that's true. Good writing. I think you have to believe.
Let me start with you here, because it was pretty clear that President Trump was upset about this. This continues to happen. It's just an amazing amount of his nominees that have not been able to make it. But in this case, you know, the immediate public smear campaigns, this one worked.
It certainly did, and what a shame, because Ronny Jackson is an honorable man who has served 3 presidents honorably. He has an unblemished record for the past 12 years. And how is it that all of a sudden now he's a bad employee who's done things wrong? I mean, you've got to be kidding me. Where was the vetting process then under President Obama and President George Bush? I think voters sense that this just doesn't pass the sniff test. It looks like a political hit job is what it is.
Michael, I'm pretty sure President Trump has the record for nominees not being able to go through the system, and then those that do go through, like a Mike Pompeo, who barely made it through today. Well, he probably got more votes than anyone thought, but it was a nail biter until a couple days ago.
Yeah, you know, this scenario is difficult. If we look at Dr. Jackson's situation, this is a scorched earth political hit on the man who has served very honorably as an admiral in the U.S. Navy. And, you know, they're holding him to a standard of a position in Indianapolis, when in reality he's dealing with highly sophisticated, educated, experienced individuals out of the White House, the Pentagon, State Department, and U.S. Congress. So what they've done there is absurd and ridiculous to try to impugn his career and his character. But this is really about, in the case of the VA, preserving a core constituency, I think, which is the bureaucrats and the bureaucracy in the big government, and avoiding the notion of a shakeup. Whether or not this candidate for VA secretary was the appropriate one is a good question that could have been debated. They didn't have to tear down the man and his career and his character. Yeah, of course. I mean, we're talking about the physician to 3 presidents, and these issues never surfaced then, and of course all of a sudden they did when he became the nominee. I do want to share a statement, by the way, from Ronny Jackson. Quote, "Unfortunately, because of how Washington works, these false allegations have become a distraction for this president, and the more important issue we must be addressing, how we give the best care to our nation's heroes." So, Adriana, on that notion now, you know, it's almost a rudderless ship. It was already in bad shape. We saw some improvements, but certainly not enough. So we're at a drastic point. Where does the president turn from here?
That's right, because if we look at the history of who served as VA secretaries, it's been bureaucrats who have not solved the agency's serious problems. You know of all the deaths, veterans suffering on these waiting lists, and you know, we've had a former CEO, Procter & Gamble, be the VA secretary. That didn't work out. You look at David Shulkin. You know, he was a career, you know, bureaucrat. So I think it's time to try something new, and President Trump's instincts were spot on with Admiral Ronny Jackson. I mean, this is somebody who served on the battlefield. He was the doctor standing there in Iraq as our wounded soldiers came off the field, extremely wounded. So he understands exactly what our veterans go through, and he would have been, I think, a terrific choice. But now that he's withdrawn his nomination, obviously President Trump needs to find someone else. It's been reported he might consider, you know, former Florida congressman who was the acting VA secretary under David Shulkin, and he's got a few more people in mind. So we'll see what happens.
Michael, before we go, though, we should also say, though, that Mitch McConnell probably could do a lot more to help this process as well.
Yes, you know, I feel like in this case, you should think back to the way that things used to be in the U.S. Senate, where there is a greater decorum and less willingness to fight in the trenches of, city council style politics. They should return to the at least statesman-like behavior. If you have this sort of concern about somebody, you don't have to splash it in a public report in the media. You can, appropriately say, let's talk about this at the committee level. Let's be appropriate, not ruin the guy's career.
Right. Well, we'll see what happens. I don't think anything is going to change. I will, though, say let's give a congratulations and shout out to Rick Grinnell, finally confirmed as ambassador to Germany. Thank you both very much.
Thanks,
well,
Tom.
America has long prided itself on